Welcome and croeso all to another episode of Tales for Wales, the podcast that never fails to inform and entertain.
Ooh.
Pretty good, isn't it?
Revamped for season 2.
A little revamp for season 2. I'm Jack, and as always, I'm joined by my old pal, my old buddy, Franks.
Me old mucker.
My old mucker.
Ball and shine.
And today, we're going to be chewing your ears off about a mental little medieval sport called Cnapan. Is it Cnapan or Cnapan?
Cnapan, I call it.
Cnapan. I'll do Cnapan as well then for consistency's sake. But first, before we get into the muck of it, what have you been up to, mate?
Oh, not a huge amount. We were both saying before record, we're a little bit tired, we're a little bit groggy. So we're going to try and perk ourselves up with your friend of mine, alcohol. So I'm
sorry, guys, alright? We're human, just like the rest of you.
Yeah, tears of clown over here. I've got, for first time in a while, I'm on a Stella.
Ooh, Stella.
Yeah. So
fancy boy.
I am in a fancy. I love how Stella's class is fancy when it's
commonly known as wife beater, aka our fanciest beer.
Lardy-dar. Someone can afford to beat their wife. Ooh, someone's doing alright for themselves.
Someone has the energy to do it. I'm too fucking tired tonight.
So. I'm on Stellars. And what are you on?
Oh, I'm using up some last of my vodka, to be honest.
The last of the reserves.
It's alright, it's fine. Yeah. I'm on the reserves, yeah. Scraping the bottom of the barrel. But it'll do the job, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Smirnoff's finest.
You been up to much this week? Anything to regale the audience?
No, I got a little bit of just sort of social awkwardness, if you want to hear it.
Yeah, go on, hit me with some.
Yeah, why not? It'll complement our sort of tired, miserable nature by just regaling you with how it made me miserable on the weekend. Basically, it was a bit of a social faux pas more than anything. So I was out with a few guys from work in Newport on Saturday, and my mate, he's just got a new flat down there. So he's had it for a while now, and I keep saying I want to go in and have a nose and sort of see the place and have a couple of beers there. And, life gets in the way, but I decided to finally go down on Saturday with a few of the guys I knew from work. And so when we were there, my mate's girlfriend, the guy who was a flat's girlfriend, he was on about the wedding and stuff like that, and the invites and whatnot.
For your wedding?
Yes, for my wedding. Then another one of the guys who I know from work, lovely guy, but maybe not as close as some of the others, he was like, oh, what invites you on about? And I was like, oh, the wedding. And he went, what wedding? I said, well, mine. And then he went, oh, I don't think I've had anything. And when you just have a social panic, and I just sort of went, I don't know what went through my mind, but I thought, oh, here's a great idea, lie. That's what they teach you in school, isn't it? Just lie when you're at a loss. So I went, oh, have you not? Oh, we sent them ages ago. It must be on its way, blah, blah, blah. And just squirming, out of the pure awkwardness of it. And then he went well, I don't think you could have, because how'd you get my address? And I was like, oh, I've been caught.
What a tangled web we weave when we do something to deceive.
Instead of trying to weave a more intricate web, I just gave up my, sorry mate, you didn't make the list. And I just thought, but a part of me was like, oh, you know what I'm trying to do?
Yeah.
Don't bloody call me out on my lies. Just
that's a bit on him as well. Yes, there's a faux pas. He could have just gone, you're lying, but I don't have to tell everybody you're a big fat liar.
Yeah, maybe I deserve it. Maybe comeuppance for having
I always got a thing, just never be awkward. Just do the easy thing.
Don't be a sayer. Just keep it to yourself.
Yeah, why do we have to be a sayer? I remember once when I got to the cinema when I was about 14, and I was with do you remember that kid? And,
we might have to beep his name out because I'm about to call him the Lizard King now.
Yeah, let's beep his name because we called him the Lizard King for such a cruel reason because he used to have quite bad eczema.
Through no fault of his own.
But I was staying at his house, and another boy wanted to stay as well, and he went, oh yeah, I'll ask my dad if you could stay, and he pretended to, he called him. He's on the phone going oh yeah, Dad, hey, can't blah 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 stay over tonight? Oh, what? You can't stay? Oh, I'm so gutted. And the phone just started ringing whilst he was lying.
It's just a setting on my phone. It always rings out loud.
It was so awkward. It felt sitcom like. It was so untrue. But,
turns out the Lizard King was a snake at the same time.
Yeah, I had someone be socially awkward to me the other day. I went to, me and my partner are trying to, we had opened up a joint account, and we can't do it online, so you had to go to so we went into and we sat down with the lady. For her discretion, we'll call her Bonnie. Because that's so
shit,
close.
that was a real name, Bonnie.
her first name is so close to that, it's ridiculous. But anyway, it's too late now. Bonnie at a bank, which we won't say. I think I've already said. Anyway,
Yeah, so I can beat that out as well.
yeah.
More out.
We got in and we sat down. She was quite like an odd-looking woman. She looked quite like she belonged in the like what's that film with David Bowie, Labyrinth?
Oh, like Hoggle.
Yeah, Hoggle.
Horrible.
Huh? No, I ain't. I'm Hoggle. Who are you?
She was quite Hoggle-esque, and she was like quite frumpy.
We're being very superficial in this episode.
I know.
Our grumpiness is fueling it.
You've got us being sassy. Yes, she had like a bit of a waddle on her, and she was just she was like, oh, hello, and she took us to a like chair to sit down like in a private area of the bank, and she was like, right, you're opening up a bank account, are we?
Just to harken back to Lamb, just going like, we got to get a credit rating, otherwise you'll be in a bog of eternal stench.
I don't know nothing. And then Bowie turned up halfway through. The babe tells me nothing.
Yeah, you remind me of the Babe.
What babe? Babe with the power. Put that in.
You remind me of the babe. Babe with the power. Power of voodoo. You do. Remind me of the babe.
Power with the bank account.
Yeah, you want to open up a joint account. What account? A joint account.
Very good.
So my baby crying out of babes could cry. I had to get that
That
out.
is such a bang. I got it. That's a
absolute
bang of a
banger.
song. I got to listen to that soon. Actually,
But-
it's going in this. I'll listen to it then.
Yeah. So we sat down. She went, right, so you both get married, are you? Oh, that's lovely. Absolutely lovely. My marriage didn't last. It's like, fucking
Oh,
hell.
no.
Brilliant. And she went, oh, but I'm sure that won't happen to you two. It's like, oh, brilliant.
Just go, even though statistically speaking, you've got like a couple of pie charts or something.
Yeah. And then she went, anyway, my broken marriage won't stop you opening a lovely bank account for you two lovely people. I was like, stop saying lovely, we're fine. And then she went,
Does that sound like a threat? my broken marriage won't stop you. Will it? Or
will it? And then she started like harping on. She went back into like the professional side, and then halfway through, she like extended her like crone-like pointed finger at went to Emma. Went, I know you, girl. Emma. And I was like, do you? And she was like, I've seen you, girl. You are the girl who haunts my dreams. And this,
You make it sound like a Skeksis.
I know. No, she apparently she recognised her from running in the park on a Saturday. Not running from her. Running in they do that thing on the park run.
Like park run, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought, you do park
From
run.
the sound of it, she didn't sound like from
No.
the description, she didn't sound like a woman that would be a
So,
park runner.
she was like an adjudicator, or someone who goes down to like
Oh, I
facilitate
get it.
it.
Part of it, but no, come on, not part of it. Like,
Yeah.
runs a fucking Facebook group or
This
something.
makes sense. But then she was like, "Oh, I've done a marathon." I was like, "What?" Like, fair play. She's
I've administrated a marathon.
Yeah. I run a marathon Facebook group. So, then she started going on. She was like really invasive, talking like really. Halfway through, she went, "Well, I just think it's too old for me now, isn't it? What do you think?" I was like, well, I don't want to comment on your
I'm
life.
just here for a joint account, love. Can you just fucking sign the docs?
And she then went into saying how she put on weight since COVID, and she was like, my photos on my dating on Plenty of Fish, I don't look the same on them now. But I went for a few dates with a guy, and she went, and I stayed over for his house, but I stayed in the spare room because nothing like that's going to happen. I was like, you're telling this to customers you've never met before. And then she was afterwards. He messaged her saying, "Hey, Bonnie."
Fucking Bonnie.
Hey, Bonnie. It was nice to get to know you, but I just don't think your pictures are a fair representation of what you
I'm
look
just
like.
not interested in women who look like Hoggle from Labyrinth. Sorry.
And then she said, "Oh, I just don't." He said, "Isn't that so rude of him to say that he doesn't like me because my photos don't look like who I said I was?" So it's like, you've admitted you don't look like you used to.
You can sue companies for doing that.
Imagine suing poor old Bonnie.
Yeah.
But then she went, and the other thing is, I didn't want to sleep with it because I had shingles at the time. I had shingles
my
are really awkward.
God.
I was like, Jesus Christ.
How has this gotten to her not want to sleep with someone because of shingles? Like, you just said, like, how long is this going to take, Bonnie? Like, I just want to fucking set this up.
Me and Emma were digging nails into each other. It was like just bizarre. I was like, how has this happened? Why? I just want to open a bank account, Bonnie. Come on, Bonnie.
You don't want Bonnie to give you like a little black mark against your name.
Oh,
saying,
no.
do you?
Yeah, so
I'll
play
beep
the
out
game.
the name of the bank again there. Don't
Yeah.
want to get legal in you.
Don't Bonnie and her cronies to come get me. But yeah, I think anybody else or most normal people would just be like, I don't think that's I just too awkward. I just smile and go, oh yeah, tell me about your shingles, Bon.
I know what you mean. Sometimes I wish I could just be like, excuse me, you're overstepping the mark. Get back to your job.
Get your little crone finger out of my face.
No, just from there. Yeah, get that fucking bony sausage out of my fucking gob.
Flicking your little long nails like scrapping through my face. The bone's telling me nothing. All right. Should we leave the word of Bonnie away?
Oh, there we go, yeah.
And actually, to be fair, this is about so Cnapan is a sport dating back to the Middle Ages, and I think that's where Bonnie first started. She was
she remembers the first game, yeah.
She was bringing on as a guest.
She was an admin back then as well. She used to say, "Oh, I'm to do a Cnapan. I do Cnapan all the time. Do you? Ref it, you know."
You're the ref of Cnapan.
Don't worry, boys. There's no ref in this game.
No. So should we start with, this is season 2 for the uninitiated, and we're going to change the format slightly. We're going to beckon away from the Dick of the Day stuff and less battle heavy, because some comments we had was it's a bit battle heavy, lads. So we're going to try and diversify.
We have a hard on for battles, and other people don't have quite as much a hard on for battles. Is this official? This is official season 2, but I think we got a couple of lingerers from season 1 that are going in season 2.
Yeah, but I think
just
this should
because
be a
we
starting
can't
point.
structure a fucking series correctly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, shock horror that people who drink a lot are quite unorganised.
yeah, this is official season 2 episode you're in now. This is
Yeah. So this is sent in from Reese, and judging by his profile picture, he looks like a registered sex offender. But
Nice.
I do appreciate someone getting in touch and saying what we should cover, because what a fucking mad sports this is. So I'll start with the background and origin.
To be fair as well, who are we to turn away sex offenders? You know, we need all the listeners we can get. So
Absolutely. So I'll cover the background and origin, and then Jack will go into some of the ins and outs of this.
I'll go into the
beautiful
rules
game.
and the equipment, yeah. And for anyone else who is missing the irony that I'm talking about a sport, you know,
We're fully
don't worry,
aware.
I'm clued up. I'm clued up.
Yeah. So it dates back to the Dark Ages, and historians think around the 5th and 9th century, and it lasted up into the late Victorian age, which means it spans like 1,000 years, which is pretty good going for a sport.
Yeah,
It
not
seems
bad.
to be predominantly Pembrokeshire based, and in North Pembrokeshire Wales dialect, the word knap meant a lump. So in the 1800s, Cnapan was used in South Cudlingshire as slang, meaning to knock or to hammer away at a person.
I was going to say, yeah, it's quite apt, isn't it, for giving someone some lumps as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so anyone who's not familiar with the sport is fucking barbaric. So for knap to mean lump and Cnapan was to knock or to hammer away at a person, that seems to make a lot of sense. Cnapan teams were made up of neighbouring villages. Back then they were sometimes called commutes and modern day parishes.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that word as well, yeah, in my extensive research.
Yeah, but doing the extensive research, came across this mad bloke called George Owen of Henllys.
Yes, I came across it as well,
Yeah. So he was kicking about in like the Elizabethan era, which is around like the end of the 1500s and the start of the 1600s. And Owen was like this eccentric historian, and he was classed as a Welsh antiquarian.
Yeah. He just loved the olden times, and he bit
Yeah.
like us. Back in the day.
Yeah. So a fan of the antiquities, isn't it? So it's like that means he studies ancient artifacts and stuff like that. So he's a Welsh antiquarian. God, I'm so tired, man. But you'll figure that out. He did loads of like typography, which is like the study of maps and stuff, and he studied parts of Pembrokeshire and marked out a lot of mineral riches in the area. And he also helped paint a picture of what Wales used to look like centuries earlier. And he ended up instructed to defend and train troops in Herefordwest in preparation in case the Spanish came.
Oh,
So he's a bit of
that.
like,
Fucking hell,
so he had a bit of a he was just this man who loved ancient Wales, and got really into the roots of it. And then he was, even though he hadn't done much military service himself, he knew the place so well that he was trained there to tell them how to fight in Wales.
Not up until the military service thing, I was going to say a man after her own heart.
Yeah, well, he was like, there's a bit of the moon named after him called the Winkle Ridge Dawson Owen.
What? Winkle Ridge?
Yeah.
That's a slam, surely.
Yeah.
There's got to be like a
the old Winkle
joke.
Ridge.
Yeah. Old Winkle Ridge is back, is he?
Old Winkle Ridge Dawson Owen's
They called
back.
him down the fucking pub, Winkle
Yeah.
Ridge. Get him
So-
his pint.
I don't quite understand how, but he was a bloke who's obsessed with the olden day Wales, loved reading the map, studied taught people how to defend themselves, and then a bit of the moon was named after him. But also, he bloody loved Cnapan.
Well, I do after this, mate, so yeah, we'll let the listeners decide, but yeah, I'm sure they will too.
Well, he went on to explain a little bit more about it, like why it started. And it was played on Sundays, like rugby is now, and it had a big part to play in festivals and at religious times. And he theorised that Cnapan started because, he said, the ancient Britons, being naturally a warlike nation, did no doubt for the exercise of their youth in times of peace and to avoid idleness devise games of activity where each man might show his natural prowess and agility. As some for strength of the body by wrestling or lifting of boulders, others for the arm as in the casting the bar, sledge, stone, or hurling the ball or ball. Others that excelled in swiftness of foot, to win the praise therein by running, and surely by the exercise of the parts aforesaid, this Cnapan was prudently invented. So, most of that is talking about the part Cnapan covers the strength of a man, how he can wrestle and throw lifting heavy boulders. Another one is being able to hurl or throw a sledging hammer.
Yeah, I love that it's kind of like it's a peacetime sport to like make sure you don't go too soft in it between wars, basically. So you're still basically your population is still hard as fucking nails next time you get to a war, even if you've had sort of like a generation of peace or a couple of decades or whatever.
And I read it that so it originated, so like you said, essentially been training for warfare, and it's protecting your land from attack, which makes loads of sense because there is no equal sides in this game. You have two teams, but they don't have to be the same size. It makes a lot of sense because it's about training your team, no matter the size, to use the knowledge of your woodlands, your beaches or farms to your advantage and to work in groups to bring your enemy down.
Shit, yeah, I didn't really thought about that because it's we'll go into this more later when I talk about the kind of the ins and outs of the game. But yeah, it's very much you got to know your terrain, haven't you? And like you use the terrain to your advantage stuff. Yeah, that's I hadn't thought about that, mate. That's quite insightful.
It is a bit insightful, but that's the kind of guy I am. So that's kind of like the origins of it. It started in like the 5th to 9th century, which is a lot of centuries to cover, but it started a long time ago, and it was played on Sundays. It was based around parishes. It was always tied to religion. And it was developed in peace times to keep your young ready for war. So do you want to cover a bit more of the equipment and the rules?
Yeah, sure. So, as you mentioned, it was it was tied to Sundays and like a lot of religious stuff. So they'd have the biggest games were played supposedly around like Shrove Tuesday, Easter time. You know, all those sort of there's like a million things around Easter.
Why does Easter never have the same day?
Do you know, just awkward.
Yeah, that's just something we should have figured out by now. Because if we know when Jesus died, why do you always have to say when he came back or not? Did he come back at Easter, or did he die at Easter?
I think he did, didn't he? I'm not the most clued up on this, but these guys
not
were
a strong point.
No, yeah. Why would we be? But these guys knew when those fucking days were, and they'd have a big Cnapan day on those days. So, to go into the sort of what a game of Cnapan entailed, and it does get mental from here on. The game itself would involve a solid wooden ball. It was a little bit bigger than the cricket ball, supposedly. And the day before the game, you'd soak it for at least 12 hours in oil or animal fat, something very slippery, like a lubricant of some kind. So it would be an absolute bugger to catch or to hold on to on the day of the game. The objective of the game sounds really simple, but as I mentioned, it'll get a bit more mental as I go on. So the game would be played by two neighbouring villages, as you mentioned, Franco. You'd meet at a designated middle ground, oftentimes like a beach or just somewhere very open, roughly halfway between the two villages competing. Then a player would launch the ball into the air between the two teams. Whichever side caught it would then throw it to their side, and the game would begin. So from there, the goal was to take the wooden ball back to your own hometown's church by any means necessary.
Mad.
You could pass, smuggle, or throw the ball, however you liked, to your team to get it back to your church, but obviously the opposing team is constantly trying to nick the ball from you, and do the same. So it gets a bit hairy. The mental part is, right, the biggest games of the year, like I said, on Shrove Tuesday and Easter Sunday, they could include over 2,000 players at once, which is absolutely insane. I just don't know how you keep track of it.
Sometimes you forget how big numbers can be of people. 1,000 people is so many people on either side.
In so many of the battles we talk about, there's not 2,000 men fighting. That's insane.
Yeah.
So,
did you say how you scored the points? You take the
I'll get to that now.
Yeah.
So so for the 2,000 players, right, you wouldn't have to be right there in person on that that designated middle ground either. You could have players stretching for miles in random orders and groups just around their village, the opposing village, to try and stop the enemy team from getting their ball back to the church. So to win this game, you'd have to get your ball to your church ground. But if you didn't get it there by nightfall, it was draw. So the games tended to start around midday. I think it was 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, I read. Nightfall came before anyone won. You just call it a draw and that was it. But a lot of the time, once the ball had entered a team's village, the opposing players would tend to give up because of not how unlikely it was to get it off them, but to get it and then get it back to their village. Because these things, the pitch, if you like, if I'm using the correct sporting term, it was miles, it was absolutely, and you'd be on foot for the majority of it. Back then, everyone that was playing was a man. You'd have to strip down to just your trousers to play, so you were barefoot and then bare chested
to the waist. Maybe that's what stripped to the waist comes from.
Skin on skin, and the games would be so rough. People would have their hair and their beards ripped out, like it would,
grim,
and their chest hair. I heard as well, like the follicles ripping out. So absolutely sounds horrendous. But not just this. Now imagine a load of burly Welsh boys just fucking ripping your hair out
each other
and beating the shit out of you to get this fucking slippy ball off you. But if you were rich enough back then, you could take part in Cnapan. And if you were rich enough to afford a horse, there was no rule saying you couldn't bring your horse into the mix.
That is so
unfair. You could literally just ride a horse over these people to get the ball. So people used to get fucked up and die and even killed by the horse, kicking them, trampling, whatever. That's how fucking rough this game was.
I also read that the labourers, like the working class, would play on foot, and then the gentry would use horses. And
that's it, yeah.
But the people on foot weren't allowed. They weren't allowed weapons, but then the people on horses were. So the gentry were allowed weapons like cudgels or sticks. So they'd strike. Yeah. They're meant to be used for striking the ball, so you could reach down and hit the ball. But they were always obviously used for smashing people on the head.
They could sharpen their sticks as well and poke at people.
Is
absolutely just stabbing someone. Just go and give me the ball. Stab you.
Bloody toffs just trotting about on horseback, smacking us mud dwellers.
It's to me, it sounds like a working man's game. All right, why don't just let us all beat the shit out of each other instead of coming in and stabbing us?
You're fitter than the other team. You've managed to escape the crowd. You're strong men because you'd separate into teams. So you'd have that guy from Henleys, that Owen guy I mentioned. He said that you'd have separated into teams. So you'd have I
was going to say there's specialists, isn't there? There's it was described in the article I read that your equivalent of wingers, you'd put the swift guys, you'd pass to them and you'd get them to leg it away quicker than the other team, and there's these specialist sort of subdivisions of your team. Exactly.
You're strong men. So if you picture you're the fastest guy on your team. You've managed to escape the crowd. You're strong men, or you're what they called in the NFL. You're linebacks or whoever they are, just holding them, stopping them.
You're asking the wrong boy.
Yeah, I don't fucking know about American football. Anyway, you got them blocking them. You've managed to escape through the forest. You've now landed on the beach because you'd be played literally from parish to parish. So that would sometimes mean stripping across to so you'd be on hard ground or you'd be on the sand.
Could be all over, yeah.
It could be all around. So you've gone past the forest. You've now landed on the beach strip. You're en route back to your parish. You can almost taste victory. Then you hear some cunt with a horn on horseback and he's galloping ahead of you. And you try and run. And running on sand.
Smacks you with a fucking cudgel on the back of the head.
Do you know when running on sand is like running in a dream? And then thwack, he clubs you over the head, dives from his horse, and gives you a fucking donkey punch to be fucking trying to hold on to this greased up, splinter ridden ball. And then his mates
then-
rock up with all the boys in tow, and there's a beach brawl now, and then the 18 grab it, start running back to their thing, and the madness
Fucking
starts
declare
again.
that they're better than you. Yeah. There was no rule as well about like using a bit of subterfuge. So if you managed to get away from the initial fray, and no one knew where the ball was, there's
suck it
nothing
right there.
stopping you from like
What
sneaking.
does subterfuge mean?
Subterfuge, like sneakiness.
Oh, a bit of the underhand tactics, is it?
Yeah. So I was just thinking then. I wrote it down. I wrote it down, but I wasn't going to bring it up because you mentioned that point earlier about like it's training for wartime and stuff like that. The subterfuge side that actually works with like so well with guerrilla tactics, like avoiding enemies and like sort of navigating your way through formations and things like that without getting noticed.
Such a good game, man. I'd love to play it.
And but that was another thing that you should do because so you could have the ball snuck in to the parish without anyone like realised, and then announced like little sneaky sneakers.
So you give it to a little boy, he puts it up his jumper on purpose.
Yeah.
He can have his jumper.
Yeah. At risk of death from the fucking getting kicked by a horse, but do it. So that was that's the sort of environment you're in when you're playing Cnapan.
But it's mad. It only kind of permeated through Pembrokeshire. Like it wasn't like it's an all Wales sport. No, but for 1,500 years, it was really, really, really big in this one area of Wales. I'll go into it a little bit later on why it stopped happening.
Oh, I was just going to say that it kind of makes sense because, although actually maybe not, I was just thinking, I've read a lot about Celts in southeast Wales. They were called like Silurs or Silures.
Yeah, Syrians, whatever.
And they were like considered the most Ardnock of the Celtic tribes.
Yeah.
Explains why me and you come from here.
Yeah,
Anyway.
fuck.
But that's southwest, so it doesn't really add up. Never mind, I have no point to make.
Southwest was the Dimite.
Yeah, I
D-M-E-T-E.
did try to memorise the names before coming on this call, but I couldn't. I knew the Sillaries.
I know the Sillaries. They used to fight the Romans all the time, and then there's
because they were big boys.
Dimites. But yeah, so I'll go into a little before we finish later on. I'll go into why it kind of wrapped up. But before then, we're still in the heady heydays. Sorry. And one of the things I noted down here was it was like the original Super Bowl because it was played on Sundays, happened like once a year. Super Bowl takes place. Yeah, Super Bowl takes on a Sunday, and it was like a famous spectator sport. So the main matches were like the big moments in the village calendar, and like huge gatherings of locals and merchant peddlers and traders and stuff would come from far and wide. So even outside of Pembrokeshire, loads of people would come to sell their food and drinks and other wares and stuff. So that all these
I'd love to go for a sesh and watch.
You also think
Cnapan.
what a spectator sport would be,
especially
so
today's
good to watch.
technology. I'd love to see some fucking TMOs of some guy getting horse kicked in the head and be like, "Oh God!"
Yeah, he did poke his eye out. That is a card.
But you know what? It isn't against the rules. It's completely fine. So I'll let him go.
Apparently, there's loads of gambling there, and also
That's amazing.
There'd be like local managers, so people would, it wasn't just madness. There would be people like modern day football managers. They'd be like, okay, so this guy used to be great at Cnapan. He's now going to be in charge of Carmarthen West, and he's like,
He knows how to cave some poor fuckers.
but he'd be in charge
the
of their tactic. So he'd have their tactic for them. So he'd say, okay, lads, you 50 are going to block 50. There's so many people in a team. It's like double rugby. So you'd say like
a drop in the ocean to the 2,000 men.
Yeah. And so they'd plan it, but then they'd be known as like modern day, like fucking Alex Ferguson's. They become like they'd get their success in their own right.
I did read a lot about how this was very much a sort of forerunner to modern day games, like football, rugby.
Yeah.
They nothing like this, but because this was such a tradition, the idea of sort of playing with a ball in a competitive sport sort of paved the way for it.
Yeah.
But I had a couple more things here. Just
can I just finish quickly on the Super Bowl thing? So now they get like celebrities at Super Bowl, like the local gentry who weren't playing would come down and they'd be like they'd give their like who you support tonight kind of thing, like a roving reporter, and they'd say who they were supporting. It'd be their chance to kind of like
the ringside interviews. I love it.
Yeah, it'd be them pushing their social status and stuff. Yeah. So it was like it was the biggest thing that would happen in those villages for the year, especially at times of peace when they weren't at war with people.
Oh yeah, you can need some bloodshed to keep people interested.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a couple more rules. Nothing too in depth or anything, but like I said, you had the specialist players and things like that. And the scrummages apparently were where a lot of the injuries and deaths happened, especially when the horses were involved, as you can imagine. But if you at any point thought you were getting too fucked up, or you thought, Jesus, I'm going to, one of the gentry's poking me in the neck with a sharp stick now, you could yell Heddwch, which is the Welsh word for peace. And they would stop the game, let you get out, and then reset it. And so they just chuck the ball back up in the air, and you'd have another go, sort of thing. Apparently it was something like what's similar to a modern line out in rugby as well, which they suspect is where that kind of idea came from. But yeah, so that's quite good. So if you're thinking about to get trampled by a horse, you can go Heddwch, and maybe it won't cave your skull in. I don't know.
I didn't know that part. That's a cool little aspect of it.
Yeah, and apparently tried to get the English tried to get the game banned in 1314 as well. Probably for the exact reason we've just been talking about, in that it was like it keeps the Welsh primed for war. Like they're always ready to go. I suppose I was trying to work it out in my head. The last rebellion at that time would have been 1282 after Llewellyn died, wouldn't it? Llewellyn ap Griffith. So I could imagine why, it's not even, what's that, like 50 years after, not even that. I can imagine them trying to quell that sort of behaviour.
But they did end up stopping it, later. So I think I'm right in saying this. Henry VIII. Let me check what Henry VIII was. I think
because I think when they tried to ban it in 1314, they tried, but these parishes that would play it, they're kind of so dispersed and
that's what
how could you police it? And also, who's going to say no to fucking 2,000 burly men coming up?
I made a note. So Henry VIII. You said 13, whatever it was, they tried to ban it. They couldn't ban it, and then it got to the 1500s when Henry VIII was in charge, and Henry VIII, gone woke, he tried to ban it because he said it was too dangerous. And,
what an absolute cuck.
Exactly. Oh, the game's gone soft. That's what he kept saying. That's what people kept saying. So Cnapan days, I read an article that said Cnapan days must have caused considerable concern. Henry VIII had attempted to ban the game in the Tudor times, and now the clamour for it to be declared unlawful increased. But it was really hard to prohibit traditional games in remote rural districts because they were played on great holidays or feast days, only played once a year or whatever, and they were a real integral part of that traditional lifestyle. But also, how could you, like you said, how could you govern something in rural Wales when all the boffins at local and central governments are so far away?
Yeah, absolutely.
But what happened was, because life was really grueling back then and tough, farmers worked pretty much every day of the year. So they only really had around 5 days off a year that they could actually play the game.
God forbid if you try to take one of them away.
But yeah, exactly. But what happened then is people started playing it. So when they owned the land, it was different. The reason it died out is because when the UK got unified more, land stopped being owned by common people, or it would then be owned by the king. So the king then owned all of the land. I think that was the thing with after 1066 with Harold Hardrada and who was it in 1066? It was
William Duke of Normandy.
Yeah. So when the Normans took over, they then kind of centralised stuff. So everything was owned by the king. And he then gave favours to people, so they'd be in charge of it. So, say if the land was owned by the people in that area, that stopped happening, and that land in that area then was owned to the local governor. And it meant if you were injured or you hurt yourself playing Cnapan, you couldn't go to work the next day, and that meant the governor would lose their money. So the minute the land...
right, yeah. Capitalism, mate.
Bloody capitalism. So like I was saying, when the land stopped being given to more people and landowners were more in charge of it, the landowners who were appointed by kings, over a long period of time then this ancient north part of Pembrokeshire that was often open farm fields or extensive common lands was then transformed into enclosed landowners parts that had hedges and walls and fences.
So you couldn't really play it.
You couldn't play it anymore. So that's why they moved it to the beaches after that because it was too hard. But one of the other things was common land was pretty much just taken up by people by the king's stuff, which meant you weren't allowed to hunt on stuff like that. So I always used to think, why were people back in the day hungry, like in Robin Hood style, because they weren't allowed to hunt anything on that land.
Because wasn't it the king or the land bands or whatever? They owned the game, didn't they? Sort of thing. And it was punishable if you hunted deer or hare or whatever.
Exactly. And I do think it was after the successful invasion of the Normans that land rights and stuff like that became a much bigger aspect of British lifestyle. So that's the big reason why Owain Glyndŵr went to war, because of like land rights and land disputes, and that became a much bigger reason for battles.
Thanks, Obama. Yeah.
So one of the big losers of the game in this article that said was Cnapan, because then the land had changed so much, and this game was built around them.
Ran out of playable fields for the ball.
Yeah. There was another thing I read, which was like I read one thing about like local characters, and like there was a newspaper report later on, and so this game was played for like 1,000 years. So by like the start of the 18th century and the 19th century, there was newspapers going around, and one of them covered it, and there was a story about a real ladies' man who had like perfect circle of hair, which I didn't really understand, right. But it sounded like his beard was the exact same length of his facial hair as his head hair, so he looked like a round furball.
Head and chops just the same, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like those weird things he used to wear in Shakespearean days, like the stupid frills around the neck, like they looked there to catch the crumbs. It looked like it was one of them. Yeah. Anyway, this was so this little weird tennis ball fur helmet was the parish's Lothario, and until one vicious game of Cnapan when he had chunks of his hair and beard pulled out. So after that, people playing would like shave their beard, shave their head and stuff before it all kicked off. But he was like this really handsome lad. Everyone just pulled his hair out. But I like to imagine that guy was getting battered by his own team, because he'd probably be like banging their missuses or keeping all the beards to himself.
You walked into the wrong game, motherfucker.
So they were like, right, Cnapan, let's get a fucking batter. Let's go around and batter Die Roundhead. Fucking teach him some lessons.
Yeah, that's good. Did you see as well? Like I was reading up on the thing. They tried to do a little bit of revival of Cnapan
in the 80s.
In the 80s and 90s, mainly around sort of Newport area. They drastically changed the rules to make it a lot less violent, for obvious reasons. I presume that they banned the use of horses in the scrums, but anyway, so the only thing I could see about it, I was thinking, if they had it in the 80s, 90s, surely there'd be some footage somewhere. And I looked up and BBC had a little bit of it, and it wasn't too aggressive. Basically, it was like a small time thing. But they played Cnapan, but it was like you have to agree before, like a gentleman's agreement before you go in to not hit anyone. And it was like this guy, one of the last shots you see is some guy zoomed in on some guy's head, and he's clearly had his head kicked in, and like he's bleeding from the brow. And I was like, someone's getting a taste of like the old school Cnapan there.
I also read that when they tried to revive it for a match against Wales and England, where the Welsh really won, but because they didn't explain the rules to the English.
Yeah, I love that. It was like, so Wales just trounced them in Cnapan, and they were like, the English going, no one told us the rules. Yeah, sore losers, whatever.
I saw. So you mentioned the one on the BBC. There's the video on the BBC. I think it was like the 80s. But it's not Newport as in Newport down by Cardiff. It's the other Newport, I think, in West Wales.
It's next to those were the two big teams back in medieval times.
Yeah,
it was Newport and
Nevin Parish. Newport and Nevin.
Yeah.
But that one looks so funny because it's just them playing rugby, and then the guy at the end's got like you said, they interview someone who's been punched loads, and he's like so dazed and confused.
Yeah.
I also just did a quick Google, and it was kind of right. So William Conqueror, the guy in 1066, he standardised England's feudal rules. So feudalism meant that all the land was held by the monarch, so he then owned all the land, and that there was pretty much where it started to stop being a common land. But it also meant stop being a right laugh after you little fucking virg. I think I'd rather play it in the woods than on a beach, because any sports on the beach, you think it's a laugh about 2 minutes, then it's absolutely exhausting.
So tiring. But then like the woods, think of all the trees, like
I know, a horse coming over you.
Well, I was going to ask, like, this was my little thing then. I was going to go, like, would you play Cnapan back in the day? Or even modern day, would you play Cnapan? And I thought, I love the idea of being, like, in the boozer after a good day of Cnapan. and discussing like the chaos and like nursing your scrapes and bruises, talking about like the massive hits you saw, like, oh my god, did you see bloody blah, blah, did that? But then I know it wouldn't be scrapes and bruises. In all likelihood, I'd be like fucking crying, sobbing, like in agony. The only thing, I'd be using my cold pint to like calm the swelling on my fucking gob.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah,
And
some fox hunter came behind me and fucking cudgeled me in the back of the head.
And do you know, me and you like to romanticise a pint back in the day. It wouldn't have been it would have been a warm pint. Like, they didn't do fucking...
It'd be a warm thing. You have like fucking grains of barley like floating in the top and fucking horrible.
I always picture, at least they had pints back then. But like you said, it'd be fucking tepid. It'd be really warm pints.
They wouldn't have the nectar of the gods, would they? They wouldn't
No.
have a nice ice cold pint of Carlin.
They wouldn't have that like that fucking Foster's Zero that's like fucking 0 degrees. You know, those ones that are ice cold.
No.
I also
no coolant, I don't think, mate. I think it would just be nice, tepid, fucking lumpy beer.
straw. I also think,
So you'd have lumps knocked out of you, then you'd have to drink lumpy beer afterwards.
and you'd have stew and cowl, which is just lumps in the water.
And you'd have to have fucking work in the morning as well.
Well, that's the other thing. Back then, if you was like spraining your ankle, it's like a death sentence. So if you broke your arm in that, you'd be absolutely like done for. The pain, no morphine. Yeah, I do think modern day I'd like to play it because I think you wouldn't die and you could just kind of like, we used to play Bulldogs loads as kids.
Oh,
I used to
that's
love
exactly
Bulldogs.
what I wrote down. Yeah, because apparently the modern day one that they used to play in the 80s and 90s, they updated it and the tackles could only be what would be qualified as certified rugby tackles, so it was slightly more safe. But even in the 80s and 90s, those were much more hardcore than we got sort of these days. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. I wrote down. Yeah, I was like, it reminds me so much of Bulldogs because that was a fucking dog-eat-dog game back in the day with us, wasn't it?
Yeah, we loved it. We used to play, for the people at home, we used to play every single lunchtime Bulldogs, and there's about 10 of us, and we were the fittest we'd ever been because we used to just
I couldn't play it now.
No, we honestly
No
couldn't.
chance.
We used to eat our lunch so fast, and then we'd line up. There might be about 12 of us, say, and we'd have
That's
like
right.
100 meters.
Exercise on a full stomach as well. We're fucking hardcore.
That was two things I can never do now. I never have a full stomach anymore. I'm always fucking hungry, and I never exercise. But yeah, we used to sprint at each other, batter each other to the floor. You'd have to like hold each other, like properly lay into each other.
For the listeners, I'll give a brief explanation. If you don't know, most people, I imagine in Britain, know Bulldogs, but for those who maybe don't,
we got some American listeners, haven't we? So for our American
we do
listeners,
have quite a few these days. Yeah. So for their sake, basically you have to run from one line to the other, right? And it's on the other end of like quite a long stretch of grass. And then between those two lines, you're allowed to be tackled. So if a tackler got you, shoulders down to the ground, they got you, and you joined the tackler's team then. So you play this until everyone was caught, or like one team gave up, or whatever, just to give you a bit of context on that. So we used to play that basically every lunchtime.
we used to play with that one kid who would refuse to quit because he had to get the rules. He had to get both their shoulders down on the ground.
We are such great friends because I've written the exact same thing about this. Again, we'll probably beep his name, but fucking he was this really big fat lad. You probably won't. You probably know. You'll know if he's listening who I'm talking about. But he'd fight you all the way down, right? Because he had a lot of momentum. To be fair.
And a lot of strength. Fat lad strength.
Yes, but he's been carrying like a fucking twice the weight the rest of us have been carrying all his life. But anyway, so you eventually get him down. You go, yeah, okay, I'm down. And then you get off him and you go, joking. And then you get up and run to the safety line. And this wasn't like a tactic that you were allowed to use in the game. This wasn't like a cheat move. You were not allowed to do that.
That's when I wish I was on horseback. Wish I'd been on horseback with cudgeling him to
death. Sharp stick.
Yeah. And they used to have warty hands. He used to touch it with the warty hands.
That's how that was his main move to get you off, wasn't it? Because if you had him down by the shoulders, you started like fiddling around your digits. You just go, oh no, and let him go. The best was though, and this sounds harsh now, but it used to like go in turns on because you'd start off and it'd only be one tackler, wouldn't it? And everyone else would be running, so you'd always pinpoint the weak guy. But sometimes it'd go around. Sorry, luck of the draw. I'll think your name again. But he'd be the first one, and he was so big and fat that he'd never catch anyone.
No,
and so we'd all just run around him for like 20 minutes, and then he'd go, give up. And that was...
I'm not playing anymore.
I'm not playing this shit. I don't blame you, mate. It's pretty shit for you.
Oh, what a game that was. That's what.
Yeah, like I said, I couldn't play. That was rough as well, because we got a few injuries, I'm pretty sure. I think I broke my toe one time.
Yeah. Do you remember that time when we played that game where we said... We used to line up 6 of us, and one of us would jump in, and we'd have 3 either side with our arms crossed, so you'd have like a bed of arms. Yeah. So like gymnastics, but for stupid kids. And we ran over. So it'd be 6 of us like in 3 opposite each other. One person would run, jump on that thing. We'd lower our arms and throw them up in the air, and they'd go really high up in the air.
Yeah, so we had successful ones before when we had the strength was evenly distributed, and we'd launch them up, and it'd be like you'd be being launched in the air, and then you just get caught again. It was quite the thrill. And then you tell them that with you, Franco.
So it's my go. Big old stupid old Franks, old dumb fat Franks wobbled up to the stage, and no, I was svelte then. I wasn't svelte. We had like friends who were. Such, when you're like year 10, you're all different sizes. Like
someone's had a growth spurt. Someone still looks like they're 10.
And me and you were quite much taller than the other boys, weren't we? And like broader, and I was a bit fatter and
stronger.
Yeah, but when we were playing the game, we throw them up in the air. Like me and Jack were opposite each other,
we used to go in the middle, didn't we? Opposite each other, because we'd have the central mass.
We'd have the centrifugal system, and we'd make those.
That's it.
And then we switched it with our little skinny mate Sean, who's fucking beyond a wetbag.
No, I remember you walking up, and I remember even thinking, is this right now? And there was me and another really tall guy at the leg end. There was at the front end. There was like little skinny Sean, who at the time was quite small.
Yeah.
And
she's not small anymore.
And it was him and I think at the front or something, wasn't there? So basically, the level of power had scaled up towards like the feet area instead of being central to launch you up vertically. Yeah. So the weakest were at your head and the strongest were at your feet, weren't they? And then we went 1, 2, 3 and launched.
I ran, jumped on. Yeah. So that's the thing. You have a run up. You jump onto all the hands, and then when they catch you, they go down with you a little bit, then throw you up in the air. And
because of how we were positioned, you just kind of went very much forward, but like because of the strength variation on it, you just went like the most vertical I've ever seen anything.
My feet were so high in the air.
Pile drive drone fucking head into the ground.
I was so high up in the air, my legs were so pointed up, and I landed straight on my neck, and I couldn't breathe. I felt like I'd crushed my throat.
I remember seeing, because you landed like your face hit the floor, and the rest of your body like bent over backwards on it, and like to the point where I thought, is his neck gonna snap? But it held good, and just flicked your head back underneath your body through the mud. And
everyone was like, "Oh my god,
he's dead. He's gonna die." We were meant to be going over your house that night for like a drink and stuff as well, and I was thinking, that's over, and that's not happening.
I think we were too young to be drinking as well, because this sounds like a mad game to play with
15,
your mates.
I think we were 15.
Oh, maybe that's a good time to drink. But it did feel like it was, because everyone was like, "Oh my god, fuck, this is serious." And we went to go get a teacher because I couldn't breathe, and he didn't want to come on the grass because it was muddy.
Yeah. He said, it is quite muddy. It is quite muddy, those guys. Can you carry him to me? We're like, can't breathe.
Oh, that's mad.
Like, we said he can't breathe, and he like looked at us like, does that mean you can't carry him? Or...
So you boys can breathe.
I said, we've been shown that we cannot orchestrate a kind of group effort here, so...
Yeah, we would be very good at organised. Our Cnapan defence would be...
Oh no, Cnapan, we'd be fucking awful, yeah.
All right, should we leave that as our Cnapan tale?
I think that's a good little sign off. Yeah.
Yeah. On season 2, I'm not going to say anything bad at the end. I'm going to turn it and say we've been getting quite a few good star reviews recently, and it would really help us if we can carry on doing that. So if you can drop us 5 stars, that'd be a massive help.
Oh yeah, I will. The only thing I will say is some nasty pasty said that they didn't like our jibber jabber.
Oh yeah.
our jib to jab ratio was pretty good.
Yeah, some American reviewer reviewed it, said, "I think y'all give a bit too much jibber jabber." I like the history.
Subject matter, actually.
Yeah, I do declare.
I tell you what, go to a fucking proper history podcast then, because this ain't bloody one.
Yeah, what did she say? She went, I like the subject, but I do not like the colour of your jib.
I'm here for the subject matter, actually. I say.
Oh, Lego
was
and
fucking
fuck
Lego, apparently. Yeah.
I do declare.
There was an awful lot of jibber jabber, I have to say.
From those two folks over there.
Those two Welsh folks.
Yeah, well, she can go fuck herself.
We're not alienating the rest of our American audience, because we actually got a few nice ones from the Americans as well, so thank you guys.
Yeah, so do drop us a little 5-star if you can.
Yeah, try and average it out, because I think she's the only...
she brought us down to a 3-er.
She brought us down to a 3-er.
Although on Spotify and everything else, we're all on top 5s, so...
Well, exactly. So
yeah, it's just her on
guess
her.
they like our jib and our jab, don't they?
Yeah, everyone else seems to enjoy the jib and jab. And if you've gone through 11 episodes so far, I assume you're not... If you didn't like us by now, you're mad to put yourself through this pain.
You're a glutton for punishment. But still, keep listening.
Yeah, diolch yn fawr anyway.
Diolch,
we'll
guys.
catch you next week. Diolch yn fawr. Ta-ra,
See you
ta-ra,
next.
ta-ra, ta-ra, ta-ra.